This is a Channel 7 Eyewitness News special event. Vote 09, the official New York City Democratic primary debate for Comptroller. Brought to you in partnership with the New York City Campaign Finance Board, Univision, 1010 Wins, and the League of Women Voters of New York City. Now, live from the Channel 7 studios, your moderator, Eyewitness News anchor, Diana Williams.
And hello, everyone. I'm Diana Williams, and we welcome you to the first official Democratic primary debate for New York City Comptroller. Our candidates today are David Yaskey, Melinda Katz, John Liu, and David Weprin. The order that they appear on the stage and the order that they answer the questions determined by random drawing. Joining me in the studio to question the candidates are Eyewitness News political reporter Dave Evans and WXTV reporter with Noticias Univision 41, Mariela Salgado. This debate, by the way, administered by the New York City Campaign Finance Board, the CFB, is a nonpartisan, independent city agency that oversees the campaign finance program, which amplifies the impact of New Yorkers' small contributions by matching them with public funds. Eligible candidates who join the program are required to take part in today's debate. The CFB also provides public disclosure of campaign finances, enforces the city's Campaign Finance Act, and offers voters important information about candidates for city office through the New York City Voter Guide. And you're going to find that guide in your mailbox before Election Day. And also on the CFB website, www.nyccfb.info. And now we want to share with you a little bit about the Comptroller's job. The Comptroller is the city's CFO, or Chief Financial Officer, with a salary of $185,000 a year. The Comptroller audits city agencies and manages the city's pension funds valued at more than $90 billion. So let's get started. The candidates are going to get about 45 seconds each to answer the questions. We urge them to stick to the time limits, and I'm sure that they will. Our first question comes from my colleague Dave Evans, and it is for Mr. Yaskey. Dave?
Thank you, Diana. I wanted to start with an item in the news this week, and that was an article in the New York Times that under Comptroller Bill Thompson, the current city controller, that 4 of the 5 city pension funds did not perform as well as the national average. And during that time, also, Thompson tripled the number of city managers or money managers working for the city. How would you improve the performance by the pension funds? And also, do you think that Bill Thompson has done a good job or not?
Well, look, the recession has hit funds across the country very hard, but certainly those numbers show there's room for improvement here in New York. I'm determined to improve the performance of pension funds by making sure we have the top talent, that our pension funds are managed with complete professionalism, and that there's no politics. You know, not here in the city, but at the state level, we saw that sometimes politics can get in the way of pension management. I am committed, no pay to play, no politics. We have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in every part of the city government. That's why I'm running for controller. We've got to get rid of the waste in this budget. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to afford the things we need. Police on the street, teachers in classrooms, Meals on Wheels for seniors. As controller, I'll use the city's audit powers to go into each agency, get rid of the 10% of the budget in the agency that's being wasted, so we have the money for things we really need.
Ms. Katz? Do you think Thompson has done a good job, though, or not?
Oh, I think overall he's done a good job, yes.
Ms. Katz?
The first thing I would do is in January of 2010, when I become the city controller, is do an asset allocation study. We need to see where the money is, where the rest of the funds are going, and how well it's invested right now. But the second thing is, a lot of these private equity firms that have gotten fees and have lost our city's money, taxpayer money that they have worked for their entire careers, have gotten huge amounts of fees while investing our money. I would start in January of 2010 going back to those companies and saying to those companies, you want to continue investing from our city? You want to make sure that you continue with your funds to get our money? Where are the fees that you got from the city of New York? Give them back, and then we can continue negotiations. But we need to be able to get those fees back. It is an unfair issue that's happened here in the city.
And the job the Comptroller's done now, Mr. Thompson?
I think overall he's done a good job, and I think at the time private equity might have been a good investment, but now clearly it isn't, and we need to reevaluate it.
Okay, Mr. Liu?
Bill Thompson's done a fine job as controller. I support him for mayor, and I've told him many times I'm going to be a much better controller than he ever was. In fact, in terms of the pension funds, the fact of the matter is that we have gone too far in the extreme with all types of aggressive investments. I have long advocated a return to the basics. a return to more traditional stocks and bonds that will return extraordinary investment rates for our pension funds, and at the same time reduce the overall management expenses that will then in turn increase the net returns on the pension funds once again. It's time to get back to the basics. We need to restore confidence among our workers and retirees.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Weprin.
Yeah, I think Comptroller Thompson has done a good job overall. Obviously, the downturn in the financial markets has caused the pension funds to go down. The problem with the New York City system, with the 5 pension boards and independent financial advisors for each board, is the process is not streamlined. There has to be a way to streamline the process where asset allocation is reevaluated on a regular basis. I was shocked to find out that asset allocation is only changed or reevaluated every 3 years. In today's financial markets, with the volatility in the stock market, the volatility in the financial markets, these have to be reviewed on a regular basis. It should be more like 3 months than 3 years. So I'm committed to streamlining the process as Comptroller.
And your thoughts on Mr. Thompson and the job he's done?
I think overall Comptroller Thompson has done a good job, but I think we have to get all the experts in the room at the same time to figure out how we can change the system to move a little quicker.
Okay. Mr. Yaski, I want to follow up on something you said, because you talked about pay to play. And I wonder, and this is a quick yes or no answer, are any of you willing to say right now that you will not accept any campaign contributions from financial firms that are doing business with the city? Yes or no?
The Securities Exchange Commission has proposed rules to do just that. I support those rules. I hope they go into effect. I'll certainly follow them when they do.
Ms. Katz?
It's the same. The rules are going into effect, and if they do, we'll follow them.
Mr. Liu?
I've already announced weeks ago that I will institute immediately a ban on all political contributions from anybody who has anything to do with the Comptroller's office. This is a time when we really need to restore integrity to the utmost levels of trust. And I challenge all my rivals to do the same thing. Let's ban political contributions from anybody doing a business with the Office of Comptroller.
And Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, we actually, I co-sponsored the Campaign Finance Board change to restrict people that are doing business with the city from limiting their contributions. The industry I come from, I was an investment banker for 20 years in public finance. We voluntarily, and then the SEC, instituted regulations specifically called G37, limiting the amount of money to small amounts, $250 in the case of G37. The idea was, I think, to not totally ban contributions, but to allow people to participate, but at a small level where there's no question of influence.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Mariella. Mariella?
Ms. Katz, as you know, recently in Washington Heights, and this goes directly to the Hispanic community, Councilman Miguel Martinez resigned after pleading guilty to misusing some of the so-called City Council slush fund. Now, you've all worked in City Council. You obviously have access to this fund, gives money to various pet projects. But as a controller, what will you do to make sure that taxpayers' money is safe, or will you actually work to eliminate this fund?
We clearly need to look to see where the money is going in any agency. That includes the council. That, by the way, also includes the mayor of the city of New York. We need to see how the money is allocated and where it's going. I'll tell you how I've done it in my office. I will only fund things that have been in existence for over a year. I make sure that the expenses and the assets are shown to me. I look to see how much they are spending. And you need to make sure that these organizations that we are funding have a track record of delivering services to New Yorkers. They are desperately needed throughout this city. Many of them fund things like Little Leagues and food delivery services and senior centers, and they're an important part of our city. So I would review quite closely all of the money that goes out of the city agencies, including the council and the administration.
Mr. Liu?
I think it is deplorable for public officials to betray the trust of the public. In the Comptroller's office, I will expand on the proposals I've already made in the City Council with regard to funding and no-bid contracts. The fact of the matter is there are many practices that I would clean up immediately. One example is the use of mid-year budget modifications that ultimately lead to millions and tens of millions of dollars of changes in the city budget that are often not seen to the public. That has to change. That is one of the examples of the financial reforms that I will institute as Comptroller to root out any kind of waste that still exists in our city's budget.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, I don't think the answer is to totally eliminate discretionary funding, but the key is transparency and disclosure. And we have to, and I, as Comptroller, will audit the City Council and the Mayor's office, as well as my own office, to make sure that any waste or fraud is discovered, and obviously we'd refer any fraud to the appropriate agencies. But, you know, a lot of the discretionary funding allows for small groups, not-for-profits, to really get funding that otherwise would not. For example, I've funded for the last 3 years an initiative for autism after-school programs for young children on the autism spectrum. That money would not have been funded without the city council input, and we allocated it to a lot of good groups that really helped children with autism.
Okay. Mr. Yaski, you get the final word on this one.
Yeah, Mariella, I'm glad you asked that, because I think the practice of allowing council members to distribute discretionary funds is a bad idea. It's too open to waste and abuse, and even, as you allude to, criminality. I think, of course, we want to fund little leagues and arts groups, but it should be done by professionals through an open process so that the best programs get funded. That's what I've proposed. That's what I would do as controller. And look, voters, this is their money. This is taxpayers' money. They deserve to know that it's being spent the best way possible. That's why I put the whole city budget online. People can look at it, www.itsyourmoneynyc.com, www.itsyourmoneynyc.com, so people can see where their hard-earned tax dollars are going. And we've got to get tough about getting rid of waste in every single part of this budget. That's what I'll do as controller.
As a follow-up in 30 seconds, I'm glad you all touched that. Transparency might be just the difference between you and you and you and you getting the Latino vote. Because right now, people in Washington Heights are upset. They're telling us, look, we have no representation in light of Martinez's resignation. We're not getting our resources. How will you make sure, as controller, that families and communities from low income get their fair share? Especially now in the economy that we're living right now.
Mr. Yaski, we'll work down the road there.
You're absolutely right, and that's why it shouldn't depend on the single politician. The role of the council is to say, here's where money should be spent. It should be spent on little leagues. It should be spent on arts programs, but then let the professionals decide what are the programs that do the best job. And it has to be done, and we should write this right into the funding standards, that it's got to be done equitably across the city, and underprivileged neighborhoods actually deserve more, not less.
Ms. Katz, your thoughts on that?
You know, it's amazing to me that in our great city, we have such transparency when it comes to 311, when it comes to crime statistics, even when it comes to the Department of Education. And if they can do it, anyone can do it. And at the end of the day, what's important is that the funding goes to the groups that actually need it, that are servicing the neighborhoods. We have thousands of great small neighborhoods around the entire city of New York, and they are dependent upon New York City money in order to have the little leagues, in order to have the cultural institutions that their children are going to, in order to have after-school programs so that they can actually go out and have a job. So we need transparency to make sure that whether you live in Washington Heights or Bensonhurst or Bayside, that you can go right on the computer and be able to look up where your money is going and where the taxpayer dollars are going to be.
Mr. Liu?
And the Latino community is a fast-growing community here throughout New York City, and that's why it needs to get a fairer share of resources. Now, make no mistake, one particular elected official pleading guilty to some very serious charges is in no way a reflection on the Latino community. The Latino community will have strong representation, certainly within that district, City Council District 10. And the Latino community will continue to add to the vitality of New York City. But it is making the budget process fairer and more transparent that will ultimately provide a fair amount of resources for every single community in this city.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, absolutely. Transparency is a key. Before David Yaski adopted what the City Council Finance Division had already done by putting the budget online, and I know Councilor Yaski has excerpted items from it, as well as OMB has had it online for a number of years. So transparency is the key. But what I am committed to do as controller is opening up 5 borough-wide community offices, one in Bronx, one in Queens, one in Staten Island, one in Brooklyn, and one in Upper Manhattan, to deal with consumer issues. And we'll have people speaking Spanish as well, bilingual, to deal with issues people care about, like predatory lending, like mortgage foreclosures, like consumer banking and financial literacy issues. And I think that will help with the community output.
Well, especially with the language issue, that would probably help. We see that those setups work in situations that have to do with government or money issues. So
absolutely, I'm committed to bringing the office of the controller to the people.
Okay, I've heard several of you mention little leagues, but we're going to talk about a big league right now. We're going to talk about the Yankees, because we've got a voter in the Bronx who has concerns about the city's deal with Yankee Stadium. Listen to what she has to say.
Yankee Stadium, the billions of dollars that they invested to build Yankee Stadium, yet the community is not benefiting from it at all. They have not been given additional jobs. They have not been given additional park area. And actually, we're losing more than we were gaining when we had the old stadium.
A lot of frustration in the Bronx. The city gave more than $800 million in subsidies, 22 acres of parkland, to build Yankee Stadium. So the question I have for you all is, did the city make a good deal with the Yankees? And also, you know, what as comptroller would you do in the future with these kind of big investments that the city would be making in stadiums or other big facilities like that? Mr. Liu, let's begin with you on this.
Well, there are many questions outstanding about the Yankee Stadium deal and how it actually benefits the taxpayers and residents of New York City. I've talked for quite a lot of time about how some of the numbers that the administration used to support the amount of taxpayer financing that deal required is questionable. You look at how the mayor reversed himself on getting the free box seats at the stadium for city officials at the expense of hundreds of parking spaces. You look at how, in contrast to Citi Fields, where the Mets play, where there is only one stadium standing, at Yankee Stadium, there are still 2 stadiums, and the kids and the local residents, they do not have any park space. Though this is a deal, among others, that I will review intensively as comptroller.
Okay, Mr. Weprin?
Well, I'm a Met fan, but at least this year we're getting a better return on our money from the Yankees. But in any case, you know, most of the federal tax exemption came through the tax-exempt status of the bonds, which the IRS authorized. So it really wasn't so much the city subsidy as a federal government subsidy. At the same time, there was a community benefits agreement. I think we should hold EDC and the powers that be, the Yankees in this case, to that community benefits agreement to make sure that everything is done that it's supposed to be done. And I would use the audit function to go to EDC and to look at the deals on an individual basis. But most of the subsidy was due to the tax-exempt status of the federal bonds. Okay,
Mr. Yaski, would you enforce the deal? And what do you think about the deal in and of itself?
Your question. Not a good deal. Not a good use of taxpayer dollars. And we're seeing history repeat itself now with the proposed basketball stadium. The MTA, which raised the fare for regular subway riders and bus riders, raised it 25 cents, then turned around a couple weeks later and gave another $80 million subsidy to the company that wants to build a basketball arena. Look, I want sports teams in New York, of course, but taxpayer dollars should not go that way when we need to build schools and parks. And that's not the way you rebuild the economy. We need a plan to get jobs in all 5 boroughs, in real industries of the future, not a couple of big projects here and there. It's what I've done in the City Council. I passed incentives for film and television production. David Weprin was a partner there. We've doubled the number of productions in the city. Those are terrific jobs. Now we need to do it with biotech, with green technology. Those are the jobs of the future.
Ms. Katz, you approved this deal, right?
Yeah, we all did. It was a land use application. One of the biggest problems with community benefits agreements, and you hit it right on the nose, which is that they're clearly unenforceable in many ways. So when communities make agreements, which is outside the process that the council is involved with, the idea of enforceability comes up time and time again. Yeah, but my issue is this. We are the city of New York. Stadiums, I believe, want to be here, and they should want to be here. We have the greatest fans in the United States of America, and we are New York, and I believe that we should create a standardized way of dealing with stadiums. What happens time and time again is they come to the council, they negotiate individual deals, they work with the community for the community benefits agreement, and there is absolutely no standardized way of dealing with the stadiums one by one.
I assume you all will agree that the price of a ticket right now is a little too high, right? Yeah?
For most New Yorkers.
For most New Yorkers?
For it to cost more than $100 to just bring a family of 4 to a ball game, that is outrageous in the city, especially if there are taxpayer funds being used.
You can still get a good deal at the Brooklyn Cyclones, I'll tell you that.
Okay. Let's move on to Dave, and he's got a question beginning with Mr. Weprin.
As a follow-up to that question about the Yankees, if you had a chance then to re-vote on this issue, would you change your vote? Because Ms. Katz referred to that the council weighed in on this and approved it. I think all of you did. If you could, would you revote and say no to the Yankees?
Yeah, would you? Let's start with you, Mr. Yaski. Would you change your vote?
We voted on the land use approval to allow it zoning. Of course, you want to allow a stadium there, but it should be built by the private company that owns the Yankees. I'm saying no taxpayer dollars. If we had a vote on taxpayer dollars for the stadium, of course I vote no.
Ms. Katz?
What Councilman Yaski is saying is right. We actually voted on the zoning issues for Yankee Stadium and also whether or not they could use the parkland and then trade some of the parkland in order to utilize what they have. So I think the issue really becomes, would we vote on something considering the community benefits agreement? And I'd have to look at it again. I think that it's the argument that comes up time and time again. You can't enforce them. And I'd like the chance to renegotiate with my colleagues and with the Yankees as well on price of tickets if we're going to put in all the city money, because you know, I have a son. I'd love to bring him to a Yankee game or Citi Field, and it's usually out of my price range.
Okay, Mr. Luke, let's quickly move through this.
The issue here is that it was so opaque a deal, very little understood by the public, and that's why I've also talked about in the Comptroller's office, I would look at agencies that are so little known to the public, agencies like the Economic Development Corporation, the Industrial Development Agency, that hand hundreds of millions of dollars of subsidies to these big companies, these big development deals, and yet show very little in terms of benefit for the people of New York City.
Okay, Mr. Weber?
Yeah, actually the city owns the land that both stadiums are on. And as I said, the tax exemption was really the federal tax exemption, and both the Yankees and the Mets made pilot payments to the city of New York. The question is whether the best deal was negotiated regarding the pilot payments. I have questions about whether the best deal was negotiated and whether they're actually paying their fair share. But it's not a question of public versus private money. It's a question of, is the city getting the benefits they should be getting? Are they getting the sufficient pilot payments, which are payments in lieu of taxes?
Okay. Dave has another question. I think it's regarding the economy.
Right. On the budget, the deficit for next year, the mayor has said it's around $5 billion is what he's looking at, a really bad budget year for next year. Do you agree with that assessment, and what do you see as the city's fiscal health?
Yeah, we're starting with Mr. Weber.
Well, you know, we're obviously in much better shape than the state, because when we had a large surplus, we didn't spend that money, you know, just for the sake of spending it. We put aside a lot of money. We prepaid debt service, we prepaid salaries and benefits. We also, and I'm very proud that I was the prime sponsor of this bill, to actually create for the first time one of the first municipalities in the country to create a healthcare trust fund, a lockbox for future retirees' healthcare needs, and we put in $2.6 billion into that healthcare fund. That money is still there. That money can be tapped as we get into future financial deficits. So yes, we do have to tighten a little bit, but we are in better shape, and we do have that healthcare trust fund which can be used for retiree benefits.
Do you agree, though, with Bloomberg's assessment, $5 billion?
Well, you know, traditionally the Office of Management and Budget in the administration has always overestimated the amount. It kind of goes back to many, many mayors. So if he says $5 billion, it's probably less, but it's certainly something we should worry about.
Okay, Mr. Yaski?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think the gap is at least $5 billion, probably more. You know, we balanced the budget this year only with $4.5 billion, almost the $5 billion, $4.5 billion of one-time only revenue. Half of that was stimulus money from the federal government. Half of that was money we had left over from the boom years that we'd put aside, and we used that just to get through this year, just to pay the police and the teachers and the sanitation workers this year. So next year we have to balance the budget without that. I think it's very important that your viewers at home understand this. We are in a serious situation. That is why we need a controller who is going to be determined to go after waste in every corner of the budget and to stand up to the special interest behind it. Because, you know, a lot of times the reason there's wasted spending is there's some special interest who's profiting. I've stood up to the luxury developers to close the tax loopholes they were using to avoid property tax. I sued ExxonMobil to get them to clean up the oil spill. I've got the record of standing up to those special interests.
Okay. Ms. Katz?
New Yorkers want to know where their where their tax dollars are going. And I think everywhere we go when we campaign, I have New Yorkers coming up to me on the street and saying, I don't understand. I pay taxes, all the taxes keep going up, and all I keep reading about in the newspapers is how they're cutting my education, they're cutting jobs, I can't find a job anywhere. And it is one of the most frustrating conversations, because I say, you're right. Number one, you should know where every dollar of this city is going. There should never be a question to any New Yorker. They should be able to find the money. Number two, as controller, I will invest in companies that invest in New York. You want the hardworking dollars that men and women of this city have put into their pension funds. Where is your company? Where are your offices? How many jobs will you create for New Yorkers, because we are laying off people in this city? So there are ways the Comptroller can be a partner in the budget.
Okay. Mr. Liu?
The $5 billion is a very real number, and whether it's plus or minus $1 billion, the problem is very real. And we did this past year, based on the mayor's plan, put in place a balanced budget, relying heavily upon one-shot gimmicks, including a $2 billion withdrawal from the healthcare retiree fund. So this is not a sustainable system that we're on right now. The way to do this is, in the long term, we have to diversify our job base. We have to go back to the 5-borough economic development plan that was announced many years ago, but quite honestly has not been fully followed up on. As Comptroller, I will use the full powers of the audit, the full powers of procurement to create the jobs, to insist that the funds provided us from Washington, from Albany, and right here in the city are actually used to create jobs, to put people back to work here in New York City.
Very quickly, all of you, in 30 seconds or less. I'm curious because all of people in New York have been belt tightening. They've been cutting their own personal budgets. I'm curious, how have you all personally tightened your belts? What have you cut out of your own personal budget? Mr. Yaski, let's begin with you.
There's no question, and it's true. With the company where my wife works, instituted an across-the-board 10% pay cut. Actually, everybody who works there, from
but I want to know
lowest to
personally.
present. You know, we're not ordering out food as much, and we're relying more on the supermarket. It's we've had to tighten our belts, no question.
Ms. Katz, what are you doing personally?
Well, personally, I just had a 15-month-old son, so I'm cutting coupons for Babies R Us, and this is how I spend some of my time at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it's difficult because I know that many New Yorkers out there are doing the exact same thing that I'm doing, sitting around their kitchen tables right now. So we save money everywhere we possibly can to be able to afford the things that you need when you have an extra person in the house. But I would say I don't go to movies and I don't go out to dinner a lot anymore.
Mr. Liu, what are you doing?
Well, so it turns out that several months ago, my old car broke down. Had to get a new one. And I invested in a hybrid. My gas cost alone is less than half of what it used to be. It's also better for the environment. It's better for the future of our children. But I'd say I'm saving right now about $500 a year on gas.
Mr. Weber?
Well, I'm probably getting home for dinner less because I'm out campaigning and meeting with people. I always advertise that my home phone number is listed. I'm very proud of that whenever I speak. And my wife always says, that's easy for you to say because you're never at home to answer the phone. So, we're all tightening, whether it be eating out less or, going to shows less.
Okay, thanks for sharing all that with us. We got another question now. It's from Mariella.
Yeah, we all agree that the next budget doesn't look great. Some of you more than others, but the question is, something has to be done. You either cut services or programs, or you have to raise taxes. What will you do? And I want you to be specific.
Mr. Yaski, we begin with you on this one.
We can't afford to cut back on vital services, and I don't just mean police and fire. I mean Meals on Wheels and senior centers. Every time I go to a senior center now, they tell me there's more people coming for the $1 lunch than ever before. People need the city government more than ever in this time of crisis. That means we have to find the waste and get rid of it. And I've proposed, for example, energy-efficient lighting in public housing and schools. That could save millions. Get rid of some of the bureaucracy at the top of the city agencies that's not providing value. This is why we need a controller who's got the kind of experience I do, worked in the city budget office, worked for Chuck Schumer in Washington, as a lawyer in private practice who can go line by line in that budget and find the waste and get rid of it.
But will you support raising taxes?
I don't know. New Yorkers can't afford that now, and we can't cut services. We've got to get the government to be more efficient, and there's plenty of waste to get rid of.
Ms. Katz?
I voted against the sales tax increase when it came to the City Council. I believe I'm the only candidate that did. And that's because I know that New Yorkers are facing very, very difficult times today. You know, for every project that came through the City Council's Land Use Committee, it was my job to sit in a room with developers, with unions, and with community groups and look at the developers and say, how much can you afford? And squeeze every single dollar out of the project so that we create jobs in the city of New York. I not only monetized those assets, but what I did was I created social value because there are budget cuts and people are wondering where they're going to live and they're worried about their job next year. So it was my job to create as much affordable housing as I possibly could in the city of New York. And I would continue that type of toughness and that type of aggressiveness as controller of the City of New York.
But as far as the taxes, where do you stand? Would you support raising taxes for people who make, per se, $250,000 a year?
You know, I voted against the sales tax increase because it was a regressive tax. I believe that if you're getting paid $20,000 a year, you know, taxes should be somewhat different than those making $250,000 a year. If you actually raise the sales tax and raise the personal income tax of those making $125,000 a year, they'd each be paying about $300 more. And I believe that that is a fair assessment. So it's not through sales tax, that's for sure. People making that amount of money need a break.
Mr. Liu?
To answer your question, I would, as Comptroller, support a more graduated, more progressive rate of income tax in this city. I think it's wrong in this city for a school teacher to be paying the same rate of income tax as someone like Mike Bloomberg. It's just wrong. That is the kind of regressive tax system that we have to change. And that is the most palatable of all the difficult choices that we have on the table to make. Changing light bulbs to fluorescence and turning out the lights at night, that's a great idea. It's green, it's great. But it is not going to help us recover a $5 billion budget deficit. As Comptroller, you really have to get out there, provide the objective analysis so that the mayor and the city council can actually do their job and make sure that our city is on sound footing with a balanced budget.
And Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, in addition to the multi-billion-dollar deficit that we're anticipating, we're also still in the middle of a recession. We've lost over 300,000 jobs in the last year and a half right here in New York City. That's why I'm running for controller. Of all the candidates, I'm the only one that has both private sector finance experience and public sector finance experience, having served in the Cuomo administration as a bank regulator, having served as an investment banker in public finance for 20 years, and having served as 8 years as chair of the Finance Committee. As far as taxes go, people are being taxed to death. I think the answer really here is to bring back the old commuter tax. When we had a commuter tax, people that spent their day in New York City benefited from services, whether it be police, fire, transportation, sanitation. They should all pay a fair share, and I think that's a fair tax.
But if it doesn't work, if it's not passed in the Senate, which probably it won't, then what will you do? Will you raise taxes?
Well, you know, I wouldn't take that attitude. You know, if as much effort was put in as it was to school governance to bringing back the commuter tax, you have a different makeup of the Senate. You have the New York City-based Senate for the most part. I think if there was an effort on the part of a fiscal situation, a crisis, now is the time to bring back the commuter tax.
I just have one follow-up from Mr. Liu, if you don't mind, Diane, and that is that you say that you believe in a progression tax. I'm just concerned about if you tax people making $250,000, many of the people that are Hispanics do jobs like, you know, hairdressers, you know, you might cut back going to restaurants, like cleaning lady. That might have an impact on jobs in our community. And you're an immigrant, you know how difficult it is to be out of work as you grow up, you know, struggling with your family. What will you tell to the Hispanic community that as controller, what can you do to generate jobs for them?
The fact of the matter is we need to have a balanced budget. And with all due respect, I think I'm the only one who answered your question up front. And that is we do need to have billions of dollars of new revenue that only a more progressive rate of income tax, one that requires the highest of earners in this city to pay a little bit more. People who earn more than $250,000 a year. People who maybe we set the cutoff at $300,000 a year. The fact of the matter is, this is the only way to generate the new revenue in order to close the budget deficit. And when we want to keep people in this city, we want to make sure that the city doesn't start falling apart if we have to cut $5 billion of expenses.
Okay, Mariella brings up the issue of jobs and creating jobs, and I'll let the other three candidates here answer this. How do you see using the Comptroller's office in creating jobs in New York City? So, Mr. Yaski, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the Comptroller can be an economic development leader who's laying the foundation for the city economy of the next decade and 2 decades. Now, I've done that in the council. Passed incentives for film and TV production that double the number of production days, and those are terrific jobs. Those are $50 an hour, $60 an hour jobs, teamsters, carpenters, sound technicians, camera operators. just the kind of jobs that support a family. That's what we need to be creating. Now, the next step is to take that further. Biotech. We have a terrific academic medical establishment. Let's turn that into jobs, because those lab technician jobs, again, are the kind of high-paying jobs that can support a family. As controller, number one, we can make sure that we have pension funds available to invest in businesses in New York City to develop those sectors. Number two, you can, when you audit the economic development agencies, you can make sure that they're being smart, not just building a few big projects, but creating a whole industry of the future.
Ms. Katz, how would you use the Comptroller's office to create jobs in the city?
I would continue the work that I did as chair of the Land Use Committee of the City Council. Whenever there was a project in front of the committee, my job was to sit in a room, negotiate, fight, make sure that more jobs were created. And you know what? Folks might have come out of that room bloody, but we got more jobs for New Yorkers. And that is the type of attitude and toughness that I would bring to the City Comptroller's office. First of all, invest in New York companies. Invest in companies that invest in New York, create jobs here, use our vendors, use every possible way that they can by New York residents. And the second is, allow city workers to do their jobs. Right now, the government, the city actually contracts out some of the services that city workers have been providing. And if we don't allow them to do their jobs, they have a great risk, number one, of layoffs. But number two, keeping people working in this city should be one of the main priorities of city government.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to invest in New York City. We have to create jobs. I think the pension funds are an area where we can invest in good, solid companies that are employing people here, that are expanding in New York, and we can do it that way. But even more than that, I would use my 5 borough community offices as consultations on jobs as well, to help people if they have unemployment problems, if they have job problems or referrals.
I have a real quick follow-up for all of you in 10 seconds or less, if you could, because I'm wondering, you talk about the $5 billion deficit that this city is facing. Are you all willing to cut the budget in the Comptroller's office? Are you willing to cut the number of fund managers that are now working in the office? What kind of cuts do you see actually making to the Comptroller's office? And let's run through this real fast. Mr. Yaski, you willing?
Absolutely. You lead by example.
But what? How much? 5%, 10%?
The same efficiencies that we'll create in the rest of the government, we'll do in the Comptroller's office.
And you would reduce the number of fund managers?
Absolutely. Those by and large don't work for the Comptroller directly. They're hired outside, but there are too many. You're absolutely right, and we need to have fewer.
And what about you, Ms. Katz?
In January of 2010, I'd like to come into the Comptroller's office and make recommendations in order to cut the budget. Whether or not I would cut the fund managers in particular, right now, when you look at it, they went from $100 million in fees to $300 million in fees. So it certainly seems like it's an overabundance of equity managers. But right now, my priority would be to get the fees back, that all those folks that lost all our money from the city gives it back to the city, gives it back to the taxpayers, because that would be a priority.
Okay, Mr. Luke?
It's clear that the investment strategy that I've proposed actually will result in a significant immediate reduction in management fees. That alone could save $100 or $200 million a year.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, I don't think the answer is necessarily to cut the employees in the Comptroller's office. The first thing I would do from day one, and I've said this, is a self-audit of the Comptroller's office. How can we be more efficient? Possibly by having more people focusing on the audit function, we can actually be saving a lot more money without reducing employees. And also, one of the things that has not really been done as effectively as it could be is the outside contracting budget for the city, which has grown to over $6 billion. There's a lot of money that can be saved there. That's where the auditors can play a major role. Okay,
I want to move on to the topic of education, because the Department of Education, as you all probably know, has a budget of $21 billion, and yet essentially it is self-audited. So under this new law that was just passed by the state legislature that allows for the continuation of mayoral control, there is this call within that legislation for greater accountability of the schools. So I wonder how you would use the power of the Comptroller's office to do more auditing of contracts, auditing of statistics, because a lot of parents are very frustrated about the stats that come out of the Board of Ed. So how would you use the Comptroller's office to really go through and look at how the schools are doing?
Okay.
And actually, I have to start with Ms. Katz on this one.
When we are going around the city campaigning, one of the major things that comes up time and time again is education. There is no more frustration that is out there than for the Department of Education, so much so that I started my campaign by saying, I will audit the Department of Education because it's Tuesday, and then I will do it again because it's Thursday. So there are a few things that need to be done. How is the money being spent, and how much of it is being spent on central administration as opposed to going to our children in the classrooms? We have things like after-school programs that are being cut all over the city of New York. And for those not-for-profits lucky enough to still be going into our school system after school, so it gives our children an outlet, so it allows parents to go to work, there is deep frustration on the fees that need to be paid by the department to the Department of Education. So I would start with education when I become the controller in January 2010.
And I guess the real question is, are you willing to go head-to-head with the Department of Education in order to make this happen?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. When the Department of Education instituted the third grade tests, I sued them. And I sued them immediately as one of the lead plaintiffs with the parents in my district. Now, we lost that lawsuit to no surprise. But out of it came the recommendations for an appeals process in case someone lost or failed the third grade test. And if you notice, just last week, the Chancellor issued a statement that said failure of the test is not the sole reason that someone would be left behind.
Okay. Mr. Liu?
Well, I was very happy to support and to see the mayoral control of schools continue. Of course, now with real checks and balances, and finally the Comptroller has a say in the single largest budget item in our city's budget. I will use the audit powers to review the contracts, particularly the no-bid contracts, with an eye towards saving millions of dollars for the schools, for the classroom. I will also use the operational audit powers to check some of the statistics that you talked about. It has become an increasing number of numbers games that the public has to deal with when the Department of Education speaks. From increasing test scores that don't necessarily demonstrate that our kids are actually learning better, to the creation of school seats where we're really not sure what kinds of numbers they are using to actually build the new schools. It is these kinds of audits that I will put a stop to the numbers games with, so that the Department of Education can actually concentrate on teaching our kids better.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, I actually testified at the Assembly hearing to ask them to include allowing the Comptroller and the Independent Budget Office to audit the outside contracting budget of the Department of Education. That contracting budget is over $2 billion. There are so many no-bid contracts, and what's happened here is because there's an effort to get the statistics up. I have a nephew that just finished 4th grade, Isaiah. He's 9 years old. He spent half of the year preparing for the 4th grade English and math test, and he was told by his teachers that if you don't know the answer to the multiple choice test, answer C, because statistically there are more C's than any other answer. Is that what we want our 9-year-olds to be learning? I think they should be learning the basics. They should be retaining the material. When I studied for the bar exam, that's what we were taught. If we eliminate some of these outside contracting to companies like the Stanley Kaplan type of companies and put that money back into the classroom, our students would be learning more rather than doing better on these standardized tests.
Okay. And Mr. Yaski?
You know, we desperately need an auditor to go into the Department of Education and make sure that those dollars are being spent right. And the principle has got to be dollars in the classroom, not spent by the bureaucracy, not spent on outside consultants, dollars spent in the classroom. Testing, we're not just spending too much time on testing, we're spending too much money. That money should be going to teachers, so we have low class sizes, so we rebuild some of the science labs that are decrepit. Some of the schools in my district don't even have a decent science lab, don't even have a functioning gym or a library. So number one is make sure the money's going into the classroom. Number two is we do need a controller that can be an independent and honest source of data and numbers about how the schools are doing. We had a hearing the other day that showed that the graduation rate is going up, but not nearly as much as the Department of Education says. We need the controller to be an honest source of numbers.
Okay. Our next question.
A quick question for education, just very quick. The ESOL programs, being that we're all talking about emphasizing on texting, imagine how difficult it is for somebody who's a second language student. Would you expand that? Could you do that?
And very quickly, yes or no to all of you on that. Mr.
Yes.
Yaski? Yes. Ms. Katz?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes, and also better communications to parents.
Absolutely.
Okay. Got everybody in agreement on that one. Okay, our next question is from Dave, and you're going to start with Mr. Liu, Dave.
Can we do just a quick follow-up, though, about, since we're on the topic of education, do you think that Chancellor Klein should stay on as the Chancellor? And let's go ahead and start with just,
Mr. Yaski, let's go run through real quick.
Of course, that's up to the mayor. So,
Yes.
you know, I think that the schools have improved under Chancellor Klein. But the mayor should have his person. I think that I support Bill Thompson for mayor. I'm sure that if he is elected mayor, he'll pick his own person to be chancellor.
Okay. Ms. Katz, what do you think about Chancellor Klein?
You know, some of the biggest fights I've had have been with the Department of Education. But at the end of the day, The mayor is the one really who needs to be accountable. Whether you love the educational system or whether you hate the educational system, the chancellor is charged with fulfilling his policy objectives.
Okay, Mr. Liu?
Well, I would advocate a change in both of those positions. I think that we need to do a better job for the schools, and I think we need to return a sense of humanity to our schools, that they are places of learning, that this is where we nurture little kids. These are not factories for test taking.
Okay, Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, you know, I think it's up to the mayor, but, you know, I think 8 years under Chancellor Klein, with an emphasis on testing, it might be a good time for a change. I think there are plenty of other national educators. I think we really need an educator in that position. I think New York City is still one of the most prestigious jurisdictions in the country, if not the world. And I think if we did a national search, we could get a top-notch educator who will actually teach the students rather than teach them how to do well on a test.
Okay. If we don't have any more follow-ups, we're going to move on to the MTA. Dave, you have the question, and it's for Mr. Liu.
One of the favorite things that New Yorkers like to complain about, especially during an election year, is the MTA. Let's go ahead and listen to a commuter and what he or she has to say.
The buses are really bad. It's the 63 on Atlantic. I could wait maybe an hour and a half for it. I don't understand why we're paying $2.25.
Now, as controller, of course, you have no direct authority over the MTA. It's a state agency. But as city controller, is there anything that you think that you could do in your power to kind of help fix this continuing financial problem at the MTA?
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, we're supposed to start with Mr. Liu here on this, Dave.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, the comptroller actually does have a great deal of power to audit the New York City Transit, which is the largest subsidiary within the MTA system. And this is the agency, New York City Transit, that runs our buses and subways. As comptroller, I would not only audit the financials, as I already have in the City Council, being chair of the Transportation Committee, exposing numerous financial discrepancies with the MTA, but actually conduct audits to find out why is it that these buses are bunching up on certain avenues? Why is it that none of the elevators or escalators seem to work in the subway system? Why the MTA keeps asking us for more money and delivering less? These are all issues of economic empowerment at the end of the day, when people need a way to get to and from work.
Mr. Weprin?
Yeah, absolutely. As the second, probably most important citywide elected official with the largest staff, largest number of auditors, there certainly is a role we can play, not only as a bully pulpit, but in the auditing the transit authority. But more than that, I actually testified. I was the only elected official that testified at the last MTA budget hearing where the draconian cuts were proposed, and the fare was going to go up dramatically, as well as service cuts. You know, people feel that you know, really everything is going down. The price of everything is going up. People really need to rely on transportation. I represent a district in Eastern Queens where people can't believe there's no subway in my district. We need more express buses. There's a lot can be done with the MTA, and I would certainly use the power of the bully pulpit for sure as controller to do everything I can, as well as the audit power.
Mr. Yaski?
You know, there you go. New Yorkers should be furious at the MTA. They're paying more and they're getting less in service. And we need a controller that will go beyond just doing a press conference and criticizing, but will roll up his sleeves, get to work, and find solutions, just as I've done the City Council. I brought to light the fact that the MTA is sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars of property that they are not using or that they are underusing, that they could sell off and use that money to buy the subway cars and the new buses that they need. You know, you look what's happening in North Brooklyn. Thousands of new residents, no improvement in service, so the trains are packed all the time. Now, I called on them to sell off some of that excess property. I was pleased to see that the mayor's transit plan that came out the other day incorporated that proposal, and now I want to see the MTA get it done.
Okay. Ms. Katz?
You know, I would use the Office of the Comptroller not only in its auditing power, but as a bully pulpit, and use my expertise as a negotiator and someone who gets things done in order to advocate on behalf of the people of New York. New Yorkers are working hard enough just to feel like they're broke. And now, if they're lucky enough to have a job, they need to pay more to get there. And you know what? There's no other choice. So we need to look at the system. We need to look at how the money is being spent. But most importantly, we also need a controller who's able to negotiate, be out there, be a bully pulpit, but understand that New Yorkers are fed up, and understand that telling us simply when a train is coming in at a subway station, when that train is late, or overcrowded is simply not an answer to the problem.
Okay, we are running out of time here, so we've got our final question from one of our reporters, Mariella. I'm going to ask you all to keep your responses to just about 20 seconds.
Although
Mariella.
it's a very hot topic, Diana, because it has to do with affordable housing. We know we have a real problem in New York City, and we see all these unfinished projects, building projects, and some apartments are finished, but they're empty. So basically, what would you do, Mr. Weber? And I'll start with you. Would you invest more in this project, or do you think they could be turned into affordable housing?
Oh, we have to invest more in affordable housing. There's no question. It's becoming very difficult to live in New York City, and we have to encourage developers to build more affordable housing. I know traditionally there's been an 80-20 model on luxury housing. I think we have to encourage an expansion of that as much as possible to have a higher percentage of affordable housing, along with tax incentives for developers to specifically build affordable housing.
Okay, Mr. Yaski?
In my time in the City Council, I've spent more time on affordable housing than anything else. Forced developers on the waterfront to do affordable when the proposed zoning would have been all luxury. Went after the tax break that they had that let them build luxury condos and pay no property taxes. I said, if you're going to get the tax break, you have to have affordable housing. You are absolutely right. We need affordable housing so that middle-income families can stay in this city and have a decent place to live.
Ms. Katz?
You know, in politics, you can only tell what someone is going to do from where they've been. For the last 7 years, it has been my job to sit in a room with developers and fight for affordable housing. And when they told me they couldn't afford it, make sure that they understood that it was a necessity. This was not a privilege. It was something that was needed in the city of New York. Right now, there are thousands of luxury apartments, and they are sitting empty. So we're working with the administration and the leadership at the council in order to turn those luxury apartments into affordable units in the city.
Okay, Mr. Liu, very quickly, if we could.
8 years ago, there was a huge housing problem here in New York City. Today, that is still the same. We are far short of goals for the creation of affordable housing. And that's why, as Comptroller, I will review all the mega announcements, the mega deals that have been announced over recent years to ensure that all of those promises of thousands of housing units are actually built. See where we are, how far short we are, and then put each and every one of these projects on a strict time frame to see to it that the promises are actually delivered.
Okay. And this will probably be our final question, so answer it quickly if you could. There are some people who have called for the elimination of the Office of Public Advocate. And Mr. Liu, I know you considered running for that job. But I want to know from all of you very quickly, yes or no, should that office be eliminated in order to save the city millions of dollars? Mr. Weber?
No, actually...
Okay, I'm going to leave it at that because we only have 15 seconds. Mr. Liu?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think he has something
Ms.
to add.
Katz?
No, it can be used well.
You can?
We're here to talk about what the Comptroller needs to do, but no is my answer.
You would all keep that office. Okay, and actually, I think I do now have another 15 seconds left here, I'm being told. Real quickly, grade the mayor, A to F. How do you think Mayor Bloomberg has done in his 8 years in office so far? How do you think he's done? Mr. Yatsky, let's begin with you.
He's done a good job.
Grade?
He's done a good job. He's been a good mayor.
C, A?
I think that he's, look, I also, we want a mayor for the next 4 years that will focus on middle-class jobs and rebuilding our economy.
Okay. Ms. Katz, you got a letter grade there?
No, I think he's done a decent job, but I think in order to grade anyone on their performance, it has to be topic by topic.
Okay. Mr. Liu?
A in the first term, B in the second term, up until the extension of term limits, and then an F right after that.
And Mr. Weber, are you going to say C because that's the most commonly given answer?
Actually, he was doing a B until he overturned term limits, which I strongly oppose because I thought the public should have had a right to say, unlike two of my opponents, Ms. Katz and Mr. Yaski.
Okay. That does do it for the questions. We are out of time. The candidates do now have 1 minute each for their closing statements, and we're going to begin with David Yaski. David.
Thank you. In these difficult times, New Yorkers need a controller that will get results for every dollar we're spending and help bring back some of the 300,000 jobs we're losing in every borough of this city. It's just what I've done in the City Council. Found millions at the housing department they were wasting, got rid of that, stood up to the luxury developers, got rid of their loophole, passed the False Claims Act to crack down on contractors who defraud the city and help bring in jobs in the film and TV industry. So New Yorkers know that as controller, I will use the tools of that office to get rid of waste and bring jobs in. I'll use the audit power to go after wasted spending. I'll use the contract power to make sure we're getting rid of cost overruns. And I'll fight every day to make this budget transparent and open so New Yorkers can see where their money's going. As controller, the buck will stop with me, and I will watch every penny.
Melinda Katz.
It is a difficult time out there for New Yorkers. We all know that. Unemployment is now at 9.6%, and full recovery is far off. And New Yorkers everywhere are sitting around their kitchen tables trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills. They're losing jobs, they have increased expenses, and they deserve a controller who will watch their taxpayer money and get results by using the job. That's why I am running for New York City Comptroller. I was raised by a single father. He raised 4 of us after my mother died. He taught us how to be tough, and he taught me how to get results. I brought that attitude to law school when I learned how to advocate for those folks that needed it. I brought that same attitude when I went to Albany, and I fought large corporations like the HMOs to get better access to health care services in the entire state of New York. And when I became the city council chair, I used that same attitude as I sat toe-to-toe with developers to make sure that we squeeze every single dollar out of that, not only for dollars for the city, but also for affordable housing. I am Melinda Katz. I would be honored to have your support for City Comptroller.
John Liu?
I'm running for Comptroller because now more than ever, we need an independent financial fiscal watchdog for New York City. I will use my deep knowledge of the city's operations and finances and combine that with my previous professional background, where I managed a team of actuaries at PricewaterhouseCoopers. It is this combination of experience that will allow me to best continue to work for the people of New York. In the office of Comptroller, I'm an immigrant. I came here at the age of 5 from Taiwan. At the age of 7, I worked in the same sweatshop that my mom did. My parents struggled very hard. And it's these same struggles that people are still going through today that I want to, that I know firsthand. So I want to improve people's lives. I want to make sure that government is responsive. I need your support for New York City Comptroller. Don't forget to vote. No se olvides a votar. Necesito su apoyo. Elíjame y yo no les fallaré.
David Weprin.
These are very tough fiscal times, and of all the candidates running for Comptroller, I'm the only one that has both public sector finance experience and private sector finance experience. I served in the Cuomo administration as Deputy Superintendent of Banking. I'm very proud of a lot of the consumer regulations we instituted back then. We required banks to clear checks within a reasonable period of time. We invested in the communities. I went on to a 20-year investment banking career in public finance, underwriting municipal bonds across the country for infrastructure projects, for public housing, for healthcare institutions and institutions of higher ed. And then when I got elected to the City Council in 2001, I immediately became finance chair. I'm very proud that we balanced 8 budgets, responsible budgets, and on-time budgets. But experience is not enough. I'm committed to bringing the office of the Comptroller to the people by opening up 5 community-wide offices dealing with problems that people care about. And it's essential that we streamline the investment process. But more important than that, we need a Comptroller who's independent of the mayor, whoever that mayor is. And I have a proven track record, having led the fight against double-digit water rate hikes and having led the fight against changing term limits without your approval.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weprin. And thanks to all of our candidates this morning. A pleasure having all of you here. And that wraps up our debate. For election and voting information, call the League of Women Voters at 212-725-3541 or go to www.lwnyc.org. You can get the full schedule for the Campaign Finance Board sponsored debates at www.nyccfb.info. Our next debate is for the Democratic primary for Public Advocate. It will be next Sunday at 11 a.m. And don't forget, the primary is September 15th. I'm Diana Williams. Thanks to my colleagues this morning. And again, thanks to all of our candidates for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching. Goodbye.